I'm Selena, and today I'm going to be doing my December wrap-up. That means I'm going to talk to you about all the books that I read in the month of December, and I read, I haven't even counted these yet. I read 14 books in the month of December. Let me do my stats really quickly. I read 1 classic, 1 sci-fantasy, I'm going to call it, 1 sci-fi, 1 horror, and 9 fantasy, I think. We'll see. 12 were adult books, and 1 was a middle grade and 1 was young adult. So that's the stats I'm going to do. I also had 5 3-stars, oh my, 6 4-stars, and 3 5-stars. So overall, not a bad reading month, but I had a lot of 3-stars. I think it's also because I read a lot of books. So starting from the one I like the least to the ones I like the most, the first one I'm going to talk about is sadly going to be an unpopular opinion, and that is The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. So I've pretty much just realized that this series is not for me. Robert Jordan's writing is not for me, his characters not for me, his plots are not for me. None of it's for me. None of it. I'm not going to like any of it, I don't think. I'm going to continue because I do like some of his characters. I love some of them. In fact, I love Elaine, I love Egwene, but I love Elaine most. And that's kind of it right now. But those two are my, I love them, so much that I'm willing to, go through the rest of the series for them. Not the rest of the series, for a couple more books, maybe. I just didn't like it. I didn't really like it. I gave it a 2.75, so technically it's not, a 2-star. Editing Selena here to let you know that it is no longer a 2.75. It is a 2.5, because this book sucked. Mason! But it was not good. It was a low 3-star. I was really pushing myself to get through it, and I got through it pretty fast because I was pushing myself because I didn't want to be reading it anymore. I just think that Robert Jordan's pacing sucks. His character work, a little questionable sometimes. His plot was not for me. His plotting was not for me. I think we skipped whole parts. The pacing was just so weird. That was the main issue with this. The pacing was so weird. And then the ending I thought was really weird, and I didn't like it. So there's that. I didn't like it. Then we have The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, I think. And I really wanted to love this one. And this is a gothic, this is a gothic story that was written in modern times-ish, the 90s or something, but I guess it's still considered a classic. I don't know. I just don't think it's a good example of gothic. Honestly, it was really short and not super atmospheric. There was 2 atmospheric things that happened, 2 creepy things. I've read more atmospheric gothic, in almost every gothic I've read. So it was just kind of a poor excuse for gothic for me. It felt very short and half-baked almost, that it just didn't work. It was about this man. The other thing is, the thing that everyone tells you about this book is not the right pitch for this book. Really, this is about a man who goes to investigate this house, and it's weird. It's a weird house. He's going to investigate this house because the owners died or something, so now it's in the possession of state or something, so he has to go look for their wills and stuff, and he doesn't like it. It's not a good house. It's a freaky house. That's it. Not a good example of gothic for me. It was just not up to my standards, so I didn't like it. Give it 3 stars. Update from Editing Selena again. This was, so I realized it makes it sound like the pitch, Mason, the pitch that I gave for this book, I made it sound like the pitch is not gothic enough. The pitch of a haunted house or a weird house is gothic enough. It was the execution that was watered down for me. And then the other thing I wanted to say, that because it was so watered down, I give it 2.75 stars. 2.75 stars. The next 3-star is a real 3-star, and that was probably Frost Heart by Jamie Littler, which is really a bummer for me. I've kind of figured this out about UK middle grade. I think it runs a little bit younger than US authored middle grade does, so I think there's a reason why a lot of the middle grade I like is mostly by US authors, because I just think the market in the UK is pushing very different things for middle grade. So this I would honestly classify as more children's, but it's classified as a middle grade. And it's about this boy who has this talent through singing that, I don't know, it's very odd, this talent, but it's shunned, and so he has to leave with the crew of the ship called the Frost Heart through this frozen landscape. And the world was really interesting. This magic was interesting, the frozen landscape was interesting, but I just didn't find any of the characters compelling, any of the relationships compelling. I didn't even find it to be that cute or sweet, just sort of like tedious. I thought the plot was like crazy obvious to me, and this is all because I was looking at it through an adult's eyes, right? Like if I'd been younger, I might have liked this, but it just was not it for me at all. I just thought it was okay, you know, it was okay. It was good, but it wasn't great, so I just didn't love this book. Then we have Driftwood by Marie Brennan, and this was okay, but this is like a very short novel. It's almost a novella, and it's very much like an ideas and world building book, which means that the characters and plot, all character developments and plots were pretty much non-existent, honestly. And the big thing with this book is it's about a world for the ends of all worlds. So it's like this place where all worlds after their apocalypse goes, and they kind of have a little bit longer left before they completely fade away and are forgotten by time forever. It's called Driftwood, and there's this one guy named Last who seems to have been around forever. No one knows who he is or what he is, but it seems like he's dead, and there's like a bunch of people who have come together to kind of remember him and tell stories about him. And so it's very disjointed in that way. And then for a novella that kind of, or for a story that is focusing on Last, or so many stories that are focusing on Last, you never get a fully like developed picture of who Last is really, and you also never, and that's kind of part of the point, but you also never get to know any of these other people, honestly. And so every time you were invested in a story, it would end and you go to another one, and then like, I don't know, I just didn't really love this. It was like a good book, but it wasn't a favorite. I was expecting it to be. And then the themes were good. Like it was about like memory and like how the human like spirit persists or whatever, but it was still like this stuff could not make a wonderful book for me. I need more, like I need more character or plot or something. And this book didn't have like any of that. So it was a 3-star. It was fine. The final 3-star I have is actually 3.25.
No, it's not.
So it was my favorite 3-star I read of the month. That part's still true. And that was The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackworth, I think. And this one, for lots of the book, I didn't care about it, but I do think its characters were a little bit better than the rest. This is like another book that has been pitched entirely wrong. Like it's very like a literary, it's like, you know how like Good Omens like deals with like hell and heaven and apocalypse and stuff, and it's like funny. Yeah, that's what I thought this was gonna be because people talked about it being like this. No, it's like if a literary fiction author tried to kind of write a Good Omens story, like it's without making it funny and like having it kind of discuss some like themes sort of poorly. I'm being really harsh on this book, but it wasn't a bad book. It just wasn't what I wanted. It was like a very literary fantasy that's like, the plot was so convoluted that I can't even describe it to you. It's not even worth it. Literary fantasy about these books, like when a book is unfinished, it goes to hell, and a character from one of these books escapes, and so librarians have to go on this goose chase after it, but that's over within a couple of chapters, and then there's other plot starts. Like looking for this book, and it was just so convoluted and like messed up that I can't really describe it to you, and I can't really give it anything higher than a 3. Moving on to the 4-star. The first one we have is The Fairy Hounds of York by Arden Powell, I think. I got this book because of its resemblance in the description to Silver in the Wood, and I wouldn't recommend it if you liked Silver in the Wood for certain things. Okay, let's talk. I thought this was going to be a fantasy romance. I thought this was like, it's a little bit longer than Not Spinning Silver. It's a little bit longer than Silver in the Wood. It's like this historical fantasy vibe, like Regency era, awesome. It's gay, has like a gay relationship in it. And it's like, has to do with fairy. And so I was like, okay, cool. Sounds a little bit like Silver in the Wood. It's got an accolade relationship. It's historical times. It's got fairy worlds. And that's all I need to know. And so basically these two characters are trying to figure out why one of the characters is so connected to fairy. But this is not a romance. Like it's a romance. But if you're someone who goes into romance looking for a happy, all is well, all is solved ending, that's not what you're gonna get here. And I thought I was having such a good time with this book. It was a fun, breezy book. And then the ending, just complete tonal shift. And so I was like, what are we doing here? Like, I thought you were one thing for 75% of this book, and it turns out you're not, and now know that I like this book that much anymore. So I gave it a 4-star because the first part was so high, like I loved it so much. And then the ending was like really not my favorite. So I kind of compromised a little bit and gave it 4 stars. It's good, but not great. If you're someone who could like a dark twist on a romance ending that's kind of bittersweet and kind of beautiful in its own way, then maybe try this. But if you're looking for just a feel-good time, steer clear. Go to something else. Go on. Go. Next is Evershore by Brandon Sanderson. I liked this. This is the 3rd and final of the novellas in the Skyward series, and I liked this one. This one follows a character that I've been waiting to have a novella. I thought it was gonna be my favorite of the novellas. It was actually my least favorite. Not for anything that I did bad. I thought I did really good for what it was trying to do. It's just, maybe it's because Cytonic kind of colored my taste on the series a little bit, or maybe it's just because I've had enough of it. I've read 2 novellas and a novel from the series this year. I didn't love it as much as Sunreach and Redawn, but it was better than Cytonic, so there's that. I like it. I'm just excited to see how Sanderson's gonna redeem himself. I'm sorry, patch up his series, like finish up his series, but in my eyes, redeem himself. With book 4, it was a really good book. It was like a 4-star. Then I gave Jade Legacy 4 stars. And this one really liked, but it did not restore my love of the series that I had in Jade City. It was better than Jade War, but it wasn't perfect and amazing like a lot of people are saying. I think if you love this series, this is a wonderful conclusion. Like, Fonda Lee really did something special with this ending. I can admit that. It's a great ending. It's just this series has not been my favorite and it has not connected with me as strongly as some people. It does things that are not my favorite things. So it's just never going to have that place in my heart that it has for some other people. And that's okay. That's okay. We have my favorite 4-star of the month, which is a 4.25 star, and that's Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. And this one, it took a while to win me over, but once I was won over, I was won over. This was so fun. This was so cool. I loved the characters. I wasn't as invested in the plot with this one. It's really the characters that carried me, and it's only 2 of the 3 main characters that carried me. Naranpa, I found her and her plot incredibly boring. And I didn't even like it wasn't the plot of the other 2 characters that carried me, it was their relationship and their own characters. So Shiala and, oh god, Serapio, they were wonderful. They're so cool as characters, and then like their relationship together, like the way they interacted with each other, I loved it. If this book is literally an indigenous bisexual mermaid woman simps for a socially inept crow god vessel. Like, that is what this book is. Like, I don't care about whatever plot, like, you're trying to tell me it is about. It is a story of a simp. And that is what this book is. And I will hear nothing else about it. It was wonderful. I'm super excited for Fevered Star. I'm scared because the way this ended didn't quite tell me everything I needed to know. Rebecca, what are we doing? But I'm still really excited because I really enjoyed this book. And I highly recommend it. It was so fun. On to my 4.5 stars, which I counted in 4 stars when I was talking to you, but it was Nosferatu by Joe Hill. And this one could be more of a 4.25, I guess. I don't know. This is horror, so even though it's a 4.5, horror is not my favorite genre, so do with that what you will. Like, I might have been easier on it, but I did really have a good time with this one. This is like a long horror book that is Christmas themed, and it honestly wasn't as gruesome as I was expecting, so I think I can talk to you more in the comments about like trigger warnings or anything if you're worried about that type of stuff with horror. But pretty much with this, we have a girl who can kind of go anywhere on her bike, and she goes across this bridge, and it can take her to places with no thought for like distance or time. And so it's very like magical. She has like this magical power where she can access this other realm that is able to take her places. And one day she goes looking for trouble, and she finds Charlie Manx, who you hear about a lot longer before he and her meet, because it is kind of a slower moving beginning. Although I was so engrossed, that didn't even matter. Like, this is an engrossing book, and I think most people feel that way when they read it, that this book, though it is 600 pages and though it is technically slower than a lot of horror, it is thrilling and suspenseful and interesting the entire way through. Our main character, I can't remember her name now, she escapes Charlie Manx as a child, but Charlie Manx is someone who has been kidnapping children and bringing him to his imaginary, it's not imaginary, it's real for him, but his like imagination world, Christmas land, where he kind of drains them of who they are. So this is what he's been doing to children. He usually kidnaps them. She finds him and is able to escape. And that is kind of how we start. That's kind of the premise, even though you do see it all happen. And then you see her life go on and her grow up, and how this event has just like completely like I don't want to say ruined, but it has completely put her life on a very different course than it may have been at. It's like pretty heartbreaking at times, because you see the trauma that this woman has went through, that like how it has made her like family life and her relationship with her child and her husband, like it has shaped everything. It has shaped how safe she feels in her own skin, and everything is just so, it's difficult. And then she's not only haunted by the memory of Charlie Manx, she starts to think that he may be emerging in her life again and in her son's life. And it's about a mother's love, what a mother will do to keep that from happening. And it is intense and amazing and so engrossing, so good. What I love about this, and this is Stephen King's son, and I think this is something that Stephen King does really well in a lot of his books, and I think that Joe Hill absolutely followed in these footsteps, is they write horror books, but the characters of the horror books, like, in no way are pushed to the wayside. Like, horror is about the feeling and the suspense and everything, but knowing the characters and being attached to them, they understand that relationship you have with them is part of the creation of the horror. Like, this book was so horrific to me because I genuinely cared about our main character and I wanted her to have a better life than this, but seeing like the devastation, that's what the horror was. And like he had me rooting for her, and just it was an emotional experience. I thoroughly enjoyed Nosferatu. Then my first 5-star was a novella, A Spindle Splintered. This was so good. I love it so much. It was in my favorite books of the year video, so I will link that. This was so freaking good. It's like this fairy tale novella following a chronically ill character who on her 21st birthday pricks her finger and is taken to an actual Sleeping Beauty retelling. And you see her and this other Sleeping Beauty as they try to kind of undo what our main character knows is going to happen to her because she's a Sleeping Beauty. And there's twists and turns, and it's just so good. The themes, this is a book with themes that I love. I absolutely loved it. Themes of gender and disability and agency and like health and sickness and not being who people want you to be and not being who you want to be. It's just so good. I loved this book so much. I adored it. Then we have another favorite of the year, A Marvelous Life by Freya Marske. This is like a historical fantasy, romantic fantasy kind of thing. I don't know if it's a fantasy romance, but I would say like 50% plot, 50% romance. Kind of like A Winter's Orbit or For the Wolf. It's kind of like that balance. We have two wonderful characters here. One of them is magical, one of them is not, and the non-magical one is just made seemingly by an accident, like a liaison to the magical world. And so his counterpart, the liaison from the magical world to the mundane world, is Edwin. Yeah, Robin and Edwin. And they are so good, such good characters with such good dynamics, such a good relationship, such like good chemistry. And then to have a plot that they have to kind of team up to figure out what's going on because something big is, something sinister is. And it was so good. It was just like such a feel-good, like sweet romance and with such great characters that I absolutely adored. I loved it. I loved it so much. It's one of my favorite books of the year. The Baron Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is the first in a series, a folkloric, beautiful fantasy book about a girl named Vasya who is just very different. She lives in Russia and she's a woman, so she's supposed to have a very specific life, and Vasya is just not that person. She's very wild even as a kid, and you kind of see her grow up with her and grow into her wildness, but also grow out of the place that she is living, really. And you see her as she sees the Russian spirits and tries to help them, but as Christianity is taking hold, they're kind of fading because people are kind of forgetting about them. And that's not great because there's a big threat coming that they are needed for. And Vasya might be the only one who could help them. I love this book. It was so atmospheric. It was so wonderful. It was so perfect, perfectly plotted, perfectly paced. It might be slow. It's slow. It's slow for some people, but I absolutely loved it. I thought the emotional punch was there. The connection with Vasya, the main character, was there. The folklore aspects were there, and the pacing in which they came in, oh, it was so good. The day-to-day life was made, it was like seasoned with the folklore and folklore creatures in a way that I absolutely adored. The conflicts and the villains were so realistic and so complex that I just adored it, and I was rooting for Vasya the entire time. This could be a new favorite series, and I loved it. It was like my 6th favorite book of the year or something. We have The Wise Man's Fear. I recently read Name of the Wind and absolutely loved it, 5 stars. This one, I loved it. It was my last book of the year, but I didn't love it as much. I had mixed feelings, honestly. The first part, loved. 200 pages, 250 pages, oh, it is so good. And then we change. We go on a lot of what feel like side quests. And once we get into the biggest, like the next big act of this book, I was into that. I was like, okay, good, we like this. And then we get into a part that I still liked, but didn't like it. It wasn't as good. And then we slowly like work our way back to arcs that I enjoy until we get to the end, which is so good. So really this book is a lot of stuff that I enjoyed but didn't love in the middle, bookended by stuff I loved. So I think it has some of the best moments in the Kingkiller Chronicle. I love being with Kvothe. I love being with these characters, especially in the beginning. I absolutely love this series. And I am super excited to continue it whenever the 3rd book comes out, because I do have hope. And honestly, people have said some things about the 3rd book and Patrick Rothfuss, but I honestly think after this, he can do it. He can wrap it up in 1 book. He absolutely can. This was a long book, and a lot of it may have felt sort of meandering to some people, but honestly, I think that that's how life is. That's how Kvothe's life is. So I was fine with it, and I think that that's how the 3rd book's gonna be. That's how the series is. But there's so much beauty in it, and a lot of the genius is in how it is such a life. Like, I genuinely feel like I've been living with Kvothe. I feel like he's like one of my best friends. Like, something happens and I'm like, oh my god, Kvothe would love that or something. Like, these books were so real and immersive to me, and these characters were so real to me. I absolutely loved it. I think I read the last like 400 pages of this in like a day. It was so interesting. Also, this was the last book I finished in 2021. I loved it. Okay, so those are the books that I read in the month of December. Thank you for watching this wrap up, and thank you for bearing with me. I know we're like halfway through January at this point, and we're just getting my December wrap up. But thank you for watching anyways, and I will see you next time. Let me know what your favorite books you read in December were, and I'll see you next time. Bye!